Bloodbending. It's said to be the most powerful and feared form of bending in the world. In the main Avatar timeline, it's embraced by only the most evil, despicable, and horrid of villains. But what if it were embraced by one of the most influential waterbenders of all time? No, not him. Seriously? Come on, you're not even trying. Wait, there, stop. Yes, today we answer the question, what if Katara went full bloodbender?
Congratulations, Katara. You're a bloodbender.
But before we get into branching timelines, let's take a quick refresher on what bloodbending is exactly. Bloodbending is the most advanced form of waterbending. It allows the user to take control of another victim's fluids or blood. A bloodbender is said to only be able to perform this technique under a full moon. However, there have been some notable exceptions to this rule. While bloodbending hasn't been used to perform complicated tasks, it can take almost anyone out of a fight immediately. It can also be used to take away someone's bending by disrupting the victim's chi paths.
What did you do to me?
Your firebending is gone. Forever.
Lastly, bloodbending is the only form that is known to subject the user to madness. This last point is crucial as it will not only have huge implications for Katara, but for the entire world of Avatar.
When you're a waterbender in a strange land, you do what you must to survive.
Okay, with that out of the way, let's check out those timelines again. So we already know what happens in the main continuity, but what if things went a little differently? To answer that question, we first have to ponder why, which brings us right here. In this alternate timeline, things go a little differently in the battle between Zuko and AZULA.
No lightning today? What's the matter? Afraid I'll redirect it?
I'll show you lightning!
You must create a pathway from your fingertips, up your arm to your shoulders, then down into your stomach. The stomach detour is critical. You must not let the lightning pass through your heart, or the damage could be deadly.
This time, Zuko fails to perform the redirection correctly. The lightning finds Zuko's heart and kills him outright. The Prince of the Fire Nation is no more. Katara is devastated seeing Zuko collapse and racked with the guilt of letting him fight alone.
What are you doing? She's playing you. She knows she can't take us both, so she's trying to separate us.
She slowly loses her nerve. Meanwhile, AZULA starts to regain her composure and the tide of the battle changes dramatically. Overcome with shock and unable to focus, Katara stands no chance against AZULA. But instead of ending her, AZULA decides to take Katara prisoner as a precaution. Elsewhere, Ozai is defeated and stripped of his bending by Aang. At last, the 100-year war is over. Or so you might think. With AZULA in charge, she gets to decide how the Fire Nation moves forward. And with the airships destroyed, she does the one sensible thing she can.
I'm done. I know when I'm beaten. You got me. A princess surrenders with honor.
The events of the promise play out. However, this time, instead of FIRELORD Zuko learning how to rule responsibly, we have the political mastermind of FIRELORD AZULA.
You've beaten me at my own game.
Don't flatter yourself. You were never even a player.
Meanwhile, in an unknown location, we have Katara sitting in a prison that looks exactly like the one Hama sat in all those years ago. She realizes that despite the years of difference between her and Hama, that nothing has fundamentally changed for waterbenders. And it's not likely gonna change under FIRELORD AZULA's rule either. The negotiations for peace eventually conclude. Instead of the colonies becoming their own independent state like they do in the Rift, the land is carved out between the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom. The prisoners are also freed, including a weary Katara. Tensions remain high between the nations, but what alternatives does Team Avatar have? We've seen what happens when Avatar State Aang goes up against AZULA. Katara emerges from prison a radically different person. The months or even years in captivity have eroded the once hopeful waterbender and made her jaded. Katara swears vengeance against AZULA and vows to bring her down. If Aang isn't willing to do what needs to be done for the sake of the world, then Katara would have to do it herself. And to do that, she would first need to master, you guessed it, bloodbending. Katara begins training relentlessly, all while growing more distant and cold.
Something changed in Noatak over the years. The loving brother I once knew became cold and detached.
The relationship between Aang and Katara never has a chance to unfold, and whatever possibility of a future together slowly vanishes. Years pass until Katara finally feels she's ready. Waiting until the night of a full moon, Katara slips into the Fire Nation Royal Palace. The guards pose zero challenge to her. Finally, Katara reaches her goal, FIRELORD AZULA. This time, AZULA stands no chance. Katara ends FIRELORD AZULA, and with it, the legacy of Ozai and the Fire Nation monarchy. Phew! Okay, I feel like we need to take a break after all that. Let's shift gears for a second and explore what would happen to the Fire Nation after that. It's possible that Iroh could come back and take the throne, but given his age and 0 living heirs, it's likely that would only be a temporary solution at best. There's also Ozai.
I'm still alive.
But without any living heirs and his bending taken away, it's not likely his reign would be a long one. Fire Nation politics are pretty brutal after all.
FIRELORD AZULA. Can't you just call him grandfather? He's not exactly the powerful Fire Lord he used to be.
With Lu Ten gone, Iroh's bloodline has ended. Father, revoke Iroh's birthright.
So in all likelihood, the Fire Nation would erupt in civil war. Noble houses fighting each other for control and a share of whatever power is left. Okay, that's enough about global politics. What about Katara and Aang? Well, it's the Avatar's job to bring balance and peace to the world, and Katara executing a world leader definitely violates that. So by that logic, the confrontation between Aang and Katara would likely be a somber one. Childhood friends both fighting for what they think to be right. No matter how powerful a bloodbender Katara may become, we've seen what happens when one goes up against a fully realized avatar. TLDR, it doesn't go well.
I'm taking away your bending for good.
But could Aang do that to Katara, his former teacher and the one he truly loves? Well, whether Aang decides to do it or not, we know already how much this particular timeline has diverged. Let's recap, shall we? The Fire Nation is in shambles, nothing like the world power it was before. Republic City, if there even is one, is completely different without the influence of the Fire Nation. And Katara? Whether she's a bender, a non-bender, in prison, or even finds a new posse that aren't the biggest fans of the Avatar or nations?
Together, we will forge a world without kings and queens, without borders or nations, where a man's only allegiance is to himself and those he loves. We will return to the true balance of natural order.
One thing is clear. Tenzin, Bumi, Kaya are all out of the picture. Aang could never knowingly be with someone who bloodbends, let alone someone who would take a life.
Zuko told me what you did. Or what you didn't do, I guess. I'm proud of you.
I wanted to do it. I wanted to take out all my anger at him, but I couldn't. I don't know if it's because I'm too weak to do it, or if it's because I'm strong enough not to.
You did the right thing. Forgiveness is the first step you have to take to begin healing.
The Air Nation would look dramatically different, possibly even ending altogether. Who's to say whether Aang could move on from this tragedy? But hey, that's just one possible timeline. It's not like they can all be this dark, right? So in the last timeline, we looked at what if just Katara embraced bloodbending, assuming she would keep it secret from her friends and family. But what if she never had to? What if the knowledge of bloodbending became so widespread that keeping it locked up basically became impossible? In this alternate timeline, we'll explore the possibility of what if bloodbending never became illegal. We already know that in Legend of Korra that certain advanced forms of bending become much more widespread over time. Places like Toph's Academy for metal bending demonstrate that just given the right guidance, unheard of styles of bending were possible. So what's to stop this from happening with bloodbending? Is there really that big a difference between someone shooting a lightning bolt or a chunk of metal and bloodbending? As it turns out,
yes! Yes, it can!
There is a pretty major difference. During Aang's adulthood, we saw how just one bloodbender was able to completely dominate the criminal underworld of Republic City. Similarly, when Korra came to Republic City, we're able to see how just a single bloodbender was able to fuel a massive anti-bender movement and terrorize an entire city population. Based on everything we know, from Hama to Yakone to Amon, wherever bloodbending goes, fear, paranoia, and conflict follows it, which leads us to one of two possible outcomes. With more bloodbenders on the loose, the likelihood of more benders witnessing Aang perform energy bending to strip others of their bending increases, which would in turn lead to more bloodbenders unlocking their own ability to block bending, similar to how Amon was able to, which could lead to a decrease in firebenders, earthbenders, and even airbenders if they were to ever return. It's possible that bloodbenders could find a way to use it for benevolent reasons, but based on everything we know about it, seems pretty unlikely. The view of waterbenders and the water tribe in general would shift too, from peaceful, balanced people focused on their community to potential monsters that awaken during the full moon. But that's just one outcome. The other is also not great. It's entirely possible that the threat of bloodbenders is just too much for people to handle. The chance of a waterbender randomly snapping and draining someone of their bending might just be too risky. Places like Republic City, known for its mixture of cultures, might be missing the influx of water tribe traditions if they were suddenly shunned. The world would stay in a state of isolated stagnation, even with the conclusion of the 100-Year War. The Water Tribe would resent the Fire Nation, the Earth Kingdom would fear the Water Tribe, and so on and so forth. Peace and balance could be achieved, but much in the way that Avatar Roku believed in one where all the nations are separate, distinct entities. So, taking a step back and looking at the world with bloodbending, what exactly can we take away? It's bad, guys. Just don't do it. It's bad, okay?
Well, scientifically speaking, there's no way to prove that...
Oh, Sokka, just hold hands.
But what do you think? Do you think there's a world where Katara and the others can bloodbend in peace? Or is it just best to avoid it altogether? Let us know in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for all things Avatar.